A wise man once told me that Wise is like an old Russian car in that it will always run, no matter what.
So the vision for Wwise was really to help the sound team working on games to realize their vision, to have the power to control what happens in the game without relying so much on the programming team and having things taken out of their hands and their control.
By giving the power to the audio creator was to break the dependency with the programmer. It was to allow them to focus on more specific stuff and allowing them to have a better outcome in the game.
There are things that are absolute top priority, and those are things that are touching the stability of the product, having crashes in-game or in production, things that would break a game. So any future feature development has to take lesser precedence over that. And over the years, our absolute focus on that, I think that really helped to develop trust with our user base because they know that Wwise is something they can rely on. And quite a few customers actually came to us and said, well, Wwise in the entire game development toolset that they have is the one thing that's the reliable part.
We want creators to use Wwise more even in studio when they work through the entire process. The goal of becoming like a one-to-end solution, I think it's important. And that's something that we're still building on.
Le développement chez Audiokinétique pour Wwise, c'est toujours influencé par les clients principalement. C'est 90% de ce qu'on fait vient d'une requête client ou d'une idée mise par un client. Et c'est pour eux qu'on fait le produit, donc on essaie de répondre le plus possible à ces demandes-là.
Donc, avant même de commencer le travail sur une fonctionnalité dans Wwise, on va utiliser nos différents canaux de communication qu'on a avec nos clients, par exemple l'équipe de support.
In Audiokinetic support, apart from answering questions and helping with problems the users may face, we also are the representatives of the user community when it comes time to plan for the next features. So that's like for big planning of major releases where we decide which one is the highest priority. So of course, support will be the voice of the user community in those moments.
So the way of developing Wwise has evolved quite a lot from day one to 20 years later. Like it's never comes just from one person. So it comes from the intersection of people requesting, like multiple studios requesting similar features. We will meet them and try to really understand what is important to them in terms of workflow, performance, features.
On fait des entrevues avec nos clients, des post-mortem. Donc là, ici, on a une source d'information qui est géniale pour nous aider à prioriser les différents projets qu'on a à travers le temps. Donc, une fois qu'on a décidé quel projet on voulait prioriser, c'est là qu'on va mettre en marche le processus de développement qui est basé sur l'expérience utilisateur. Donc, dès le début, on va faire des maquettes qu'on va présenter à l'interne dans les différents départements d'Audiokinétique. Le prototype va nous aider à faire la validation tôt dans le développement. Parce qu'on ne veut pas attendre à la fin pour valider, on veut valider pendant qu'on travaille. Et puis ensuite, on va les présenter à nos usagers pour valider nos décisions qu'on a prises. Et ensuite, on va procéder au test utilisateur. On va donner un clavier, une souris à un usager et puis on va lui demander d'effectuer des tâches. Tout ce qu'il fait, on le note, on l'enregistre et puis en équipe, on va discuter les actions, les échecs, les succès et puis on va itérer encore. On va procéder au même test avec une deuxième personne, une troisième personne. Et puis souvent, après 4 personnes, on se rend compte qu'on converge.
Once we have something that starts to be working, then we'll contact back those game developers saying, hey, we've got this thing running. Do you want to see it? Or we want to present it and see, is that kind of covering your needs? Are you seeing something missing? Is it clear? That kind of thing. And eventually it goes to, our technical writer, and then it's how to explain it, and then doing videos about it. And eventually it's released with the new versions of Wwise. So developing Wwise for such a long time, and we still have a cadence of one new version every year. So it's always a balance between your vision, where you know that the product needs to be in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and incorporating what the community is asking for us and what specific developers are requesting because they have specific needs and so on. So they might not know that there's a platform coming, for example, but we still need to dedicate people working on supporting that platform, for example. And it's also long-term commitment in terms of, how the industry evolves and so on. And a lot of time it doesn't surface as a feature for the end user. So for example, when we added multi-threading for Wwise, it's the ability to use multiple thread on a CPU, on modern CPUs. You have a huge gain in performance, but it's no new feature for the sound designer itself.
There's a feature that we developed with the community hand in hand, I think, which I'm very proud of, and it's the sound C grain. We had lots of user interviews, and documents and everything. We gathered everything we could from our users because we knew that was a feature that lots of people wanted. And I think that the result is the union or the intersection of all these requests. And I think the end product is fairly flexible, and I think it addresses most of the requests for our users. So it's really something that we built with them. It could have gone many ways. There's many ways to build a granular synthesizer. It's been built by the community, I think.
People are asking for ideas. They have ideas to make things better, but at the same time, they are asking for risky features. So not going into detail, a lot of time, some user asks for a feature that would be making their life a nightmare, but they didn't realize it because it would make things impossible to troubleshoot, or that would cause a very easy performance issue, especially when they're asking for removing a limitation.
So talking about challenges, one thing that comes to mind was actually when we tried to improve the way we manage assets. And it started with how we do it in Unreal, in our Wwise Unreal integration. And the team wanted to do that. They iterated with a few customers, and when it came to launching the product, they weren't ready yet. And that was the first time I actually said, you know what, we're pulling it out. But then a few months later, they said, okay, now we've got the feedback, we're ready to go, we'll ship. People who were anxiously awaiting were like, yeah, this is awesome.
And it turned out that it was the wrong way of working for a majority of the user base.
And unfortunately, we ended up in places where it would break entire games pipeline. Usually when there's a problem with Wwise, it will affect audio, but in that case, it would paralyze a game team. This was, one of the biggest challenges the dev team had to overcome, because we had to help people who had adopted this product. We had to maintain it. We had to make sure we would fix the issues.
It really shows the difficulty when you have such an extensive and diverse group of users to give something that will work for everyone.
And that was a crazy 2 years for the team, because they had to work very hard to fix the issues and to work with customer support and with our customers to make those improvements, those small improvements along the way, whilst working on a complete replacement.
The users ask for things that fix their problem, but we need to think about ways to fix the problems of all of them. Sometimes we find solutions that are not the same as what they asked, but actually solves their problem and that of others. So when we fail, we improve on the later versions, and it's a software that evolves. At every version, we can change the feature set slightly. Sometimes we need to break things, but usually we try to keep things the way they are, but add things. It's complex, and there's not a single answer to this. With spatial audio, we started with exposing everything to the user, everything in the form of curves. For example, they had to edit curves for diffraction and other phenomena, which is what we've always done with distance. For example, we let our users define how sound attenuate with distance, and then we just thought we'd extend that for everything with spatial audio. And that's great for some people. Some users, especially the experienced one, will enjoy having that flexibility. But it also results in a very steep learning curve for new users because it doesn't work out of the box. You need to figure out everything, and so we're trying to shift our feature set in a way that's more approachable by new users. But at the same time, we don't want to let go the control that we had already provided to the experienced users. So we're stretching our feature set and trying to accommodate everyone.
When I hire people in the team, I'm looking for very, very experienced programmer that will not fear working on very large code base, because Wwise code base is a huge product now because of the variety of things we're supporting. And at the same time, developer on our team will have to work closely with game companies when we're troubleshooting any issue they have with audio. Anything that gets any complex might require a close look from our developer in their code, and they need to be comfortable jumping from one code base to another code base very rapidly. Also, the developer need to be aware of the quality of the game product, not only from the Wwise product, because when you're working on game code base and working to fix issues in there, this is very important for both of us, that the quality of the game is the most important thing that we have in mind when working with them.
So for newcomers, sometimes it can feel intimidating because they're interacting with people that have been there for 15 years or 10 years and so on. But I believe they soon realize that there's no intimidation at all, because the spirit at AK is really the best idea is the best idea. And we don't care if it comes from an intern that just had the right idea or the right answer at the right moment, or if it comes from the CEO or somebody that's been there for a long time. And that's another reason why I believe people stay.
We've got developers. Quite often people are like, software developer, I just code. No. It's an incredibly creative job. There are many ways to code one thing, but to do it in a way that's super optimal, high performance, for the needs of the various industries that we work with, that takes a lot of skill.
I think in software development, you actually need a lot of creativity. It's a field in which you have to develop unique solutions and find ways of putting things together constantly. You need to find new ways to put things together that were never done before. So it's a field where you need to be inventive and creative to come up with those solutions.
The development culture at Audiokinetic is a culture of quality and of innovation. So the founders of the company really had in mind the idea of making the sound better in most of the game. And that's been driven all the decisions since.
So the biggest challenge our users and the support team faces are, it's never about the complexity of the problem or the bug to fix. It's always about the time frame. So the user reports the issue and they have a milestone to meet. So although we can say that's not the highest priority as Audiokinetic and for Wwise, support will say, but that's the highest priority for that team now. Sometimes the development team will say, oh, maybe this bug, we won't have time for this release. Well, sometimes support will say, well, we need to find time because we have teams that need this fix now.
I do think the Audio Kinetic support is really great. I think that they take it seriously. They're very in touch with their community. And it's really nice to know that they care and put the efforts into making really great software for the people that are working on the projects and getting those features out as swiftly and as best as they can.
I think the great thing about Audio Kinetic support is that I can email a person, and it's been the same person for the last 10 years, and they really know the product and they know what people are using it for when they're actually making games.
Audio Kinetic support has been really, really good for us, and they have helped us immensely. And they usually listen to us and are super curious to hear our opinions and ideas, and also our really, really pessimistic ideas and issues.
I have to work with everybody in the United States, in Europe, but also in Japan, in China. Of course, I don't work directly. I'm helping my teams in Japan and China in particular. As we were interviewing and finding people, I often went against the expected choice, I would say, because I think we need diverse person within our team to help us handle the diverse type of questions we get.
Is Wwise for everyone? That's a good question. A game where you have no audio people on staff, you don't really necessarily have this desire to have amazingly high quality audio. Maybe you're pulling assets from various sources and just saying, well, so long as my game makes sound, I'm happy. Yeah, we're probably a little more than what you need. But for any game, big, small, in between, that does have a desire to have really high quality audio and a great audio experience for the end user, I think we absolutely do play a role. There are a number of reasons why a team will choose Wwise. We offer so many more features. It's our focus after all. We've built an incredible amount of features to hit an incredible variety of games over the last decades. So the other reason is that once you have things glued together, you have your game engine, you have Wwise, you've done the basic integration, it allows the audio team to go off and do their work, whether or not the game exists. We always really encourage teams to collaborate, audio team with the rest of the games team, as early as possible. Once the audio team knows what's going to be in the game, what environments are there, what events are going to happen that will cause a sound to play, they can start building that in Wwise. And if they've gone and done proper naming and agreed to certain things with the team, once the team gets to putting those features in the game, they just drop in the Wwise sound banks and, oh wow, look, we got footsteps. And the audio team could be on something else already. They don't have to wait for the feature to appear in the game before, okay, now we can start dropping in sounds. It keeps everyone working as efficiently as possible. And with the nature of games development these days, you really need to work as efficiently as possible.
In 2021, we released It Takes Two, which is a split-screen game. You can play in a co-op fashion, which means that we also have two listeners as opposed to the more traditional singular truth of audio listening. Through extending Wwise and through, at a very, very low level within Wwise, changing how it spatializes audio sources around a listener, we were able to set entirely new rules for how these two listeners should be combined into one new truth of audio listening and how we spatialize audio around these two listeners. And it was amazing to see how we were able to go deep into the into the far reaches of Wwise code, one would say, and changed it to our specific purpose and almost completely shape it anew. It was an amazing experience, to be honest.
Wwise solve like almost every problem. For example, for me, the most important things having Wwise is that I can ask a programmer to deliver me important data from the game, and then I can do the whole design directly in Wwise. So it's really, really flexible. I can change my ideas, I can change my workflow, pipelines, everything. But I don't need to bother programmer anymore because all information I need, I have already in Wwise. And this is the most powerful feature about Wwise.
We're used to kind of spend more time creating another tool from scratch. But if there's something like the audio middleware that Wwise offers, it just helps the workflow efficiency even more. And everybody likes to have something like that tool in their workflow to be able to enhance their creative ideas and make things come to fruition even faster if they can.
You know, I think Wwise really lets us work so much faster. The workflow is really designed to support sound designers and composers, and I think that the systems that they've built are really coming from a place of years of figuring out what are the problems and how do we solve them in a quick and efficient way, and we really couldn't work nearly as quickly without that. So I think Wwise lets us work very efficiently, but it also really expands the creative possibilities, and it lets us, quickly adjust things like the mix in a dynamic review session, and just ultimately spend a lot less time thinking about the technical and being able to be creative with what we want the project to sound like.
In the case of Wwise, it's fantastic because I can work concurrently with the team. They don't need to care what I'm doing. I don't really need to care what they're doing. I can create the whole thing myself inside Wwise and then just give them a list of events and a list of parameters. There you go. There's your sound.
So one of the most proud implementations that I've done was for our last project, It Takes Two. We had a singing ability, a completely interactive singing ability in the game. And we were able to create a really fancy fader, basically moving the volume up and down, but according to the music. So the ability sound, the voice sound or the singing sound from this ability always synced with the music, faded out in a really nice way and blended with the music at any point.
The problems Wwise solves for me is the ability to experiment and create adaptive music and adaptive soundscapes and experiment with that before even talking to a programmer or somebody more technically adept than myself. So I can go in there and just, or even before the game is active, I can play in the Wwise session and the Soundcaster create, here's how this should work, and I can demo my intent to the developer. This was super handy when I was a freelancer and was able to say, here's what you can have in your game, and I would just literally use Soundcaster to trigger different timings and different cues, sometimes to picture.
In my experience, I was considering sound design, asset design, and implementation and integration as well as three separated processes. And it was good, but I think that now it's a moment in which we should really think about it as a unique flow. And Wwise is helping me to make it flow. So to reduce the boundaries between these three processes. I used to be more focused on creating assets and spend a lot of hours in creating assets and then move into implementation. But now I think everything is connected.
Most middleware in audio works the same way as on a basic level, but with Wwise I felt very intuitive to me about how can I achieve what I want. And how can I creatively use the tool to its fullest potential rather than just using it as a one-to-one really stupid sampler, because that's what I had been doing before.
I never really thought out of the box, but now I had a ready tool that allowed me to build my own box from scratch. And I really enjoyed it. And that really sparked that I'm going to stick with this tool.
You know, I think Wwise really, has made the process of making audio for games so much simpler. And the fact that you can quickly optimize performance for multiple different platforms is one of the things that our studio really appreciates about it. I think the recent addition of the WAPI features has been awesome because it's, enabled our technical sound designers to kind of take our studio's workflows and really create something custom that has been useful for our team. So I think it's a really diverse tool, and it's exciting to see what we can build around it ourselves.
So what makes the greatest quality of Wwise audio output? Let's say it's the profiler. It's not the answer you expect, probably, but I've said it before that you could remove all features from Wwise except the profiler, and I'd still use it. And it cannot be overstated. Like the ability for us as designers and as creators to understand how changes in the soundscape or changes in the game affect our sound, and to have all of this debugging and profiling technology at our fingertips, it's a no-brainer for me. It's definitely what makes sure that whatever comes out of the speakers in households all over the world is of the highest quality. For us to be able to get there, it's the profiler.
Object-based system is amazing, is another amazing tool that I use every day because it gives you the freedom to deliver on different platforms with different formats, and that's something that really helped my process. What I love in this moment, what I'm really appreciating is that I'm spending less time on technical stuff, and I have more time for me and for my team to focus on creativity and aesthetics.
When I was working on Plants vs. Zombies Heroes, I really immersed myself in the interactive music hierarchy. And I found that was such a great space to bring the music to life and make a really interactive score. It's one of the best tools for interactive music. I highly suggest that if you want to make an interactive music score, dive into that interactive music hierarchy. I think it's one of the best tools that we can use to make something really come to life and fresh and interesting each time in the game.
So my favorite Wwise tool is for sure the HDR. We utilize it heavily, not only to use it as an optimization tool, but also to affect the mix and to be able to guide the player's attention to what we think is the most important thing at any given moment. Not only using it as a dynamic tool for making explosions and weapons cooler than ambiances, but actually using it more to direct the player and what is cool at any given moment. Start using Wwise HDR. It will help you clear the mix, make a focused experience, and really help you with just like making the game sound better.
Well, my favorite way to use Wwise is to not worry about what the tools are supposed to do, and to explore what I want them to do. In other words, the terms horizontal and vertical remixing, those kind of terms have come up, and I think they can get in the way of how people think about music. That's like starting with the theory before starting with the creative, and the creative always has to lead, the technical. So my advice is read the manual and then ignore it.
Wwise helps me, but also the whole community. Everyone who works in Wwise or any other tool helps them achieve what they need quickly. And one of the biggest game changers for me in my career was that the better I got at Wwise, I could totally tell that I have an advantage when it comes to finding work.
Now we are 5 people. We're waiting for the 6th one. We're working worldwide because we have some people in Italy, others are in Argentina. and sharing the project, sharing the Wwise project as if it was a unique canvas, it's really changed our professional lives.
Yeah, we are a fully remote studio and global. And using Wwise really does help us internally as an audio team because we all know Wwise, so that we can communicate easily about how we're setting up our switches or the hierarchies. And it also helps us in terms of working with other teams, designers, animators, and also voiceover, and building out our systems. So it's really a helpful tool working with everyone remotely. So yeah, I couldn't do it without it, I don't think so.
Three words that come to my mind as I think of Wwise are deep, sophisticated, and quick.
言葉は、まず一つ目がインタラクティブ。そしてもう一つが、創造性、クリエイティブ。そして三つ目が機能性ですね。
Game changer, interactive beast, and problem solver.
I would have to say innovative, powerful, and creative.
When I think of Wwise, I think of efficiency, creativity, technology.
スペーシャルオーディオと、あとはインタラクティブオーディオっていうところと、あとはやっぱオーサリングっていうところの部分が出てくるのかなって。
Robust is used a lot. I've used that one a lot. Adaptive. I suppose easy.
3 words would be elastic bands of interactivity and complexity.
Powerful, intuitive, and flexible.
Allowing creativity in the hands of the audio team, I think it's powerful, and it allows for great collaboration.
Wwise is deep, wide, and versatile.
柔軟性と、統合性と専門性の3つの言葉を、考えます。
Good audio middleware.
Number 1, gray. Sorry. Number 2 would be independence. And number 3 would be, let's say, toolshed.
I would say powerful, expandable, and robust.
Adaptable, clean in the sense of it's very easy to use and to look at. Deep, I guess. There's a very deep knowledge set that you can get into if you want to learn more about it or do more with it.
Wwise について思い浮かぶ3つの言葉は、まず Wizard、魔法使い。Facebook でそういう Wizard and Witch っていうコミュニティがあって、最初に Wwise の101で使う教材も最近魔法使いに変わったんですけど、それがやはり魔法を使うみたいなそういう印象があります。で、もう2つ目が、イマーシブオーディオ。で、3つ目がインタラクティブオーディオです。はい。
Solid, like an engine that always runs. Lots of fun and creative.
If I could describe Wwise in 3 words, it would be unlimited power!
Design, storytelling, and creative freedom.
E allora viva la pizza e viva Wwise!